Hello everyone, I'm going to show you how I usually paint watercolors on a little 5x7, and if you want to follow along or just watch my technique, that's what the purpose of this video is. I'll try to make it as simple as possible for you to follow. Now these are some of the things I usually paint. I've been painting roses with different colors and atmospheric backgrounds, but my typical painting is usually a Saskatoonberry branch. So I'm going to try to show you how while you're waiting for one to dry, you can paint another. So you're welcome to follow along. First of all, you need 5x7 watercolor paper taped to the board with about a quarter centimeter, or about a centimeter, a quarter of an inch border, so that it's taped down and we'll have a nice white border. And I got two boards here. I also have my paint trays, which have my tubes of paint already on them. So I'm using lots of tube paints that I have previously squirted on here. So they might be dry now, but that doesn't matter. Once you put water on them, they'll be okay. And then maybe just you need a paper towel to dab it. And I'm using a brush that is very small. The size of the brush is written on the brush usually. Sometimes I'm using 0, which is very tiny. And sometimes I'm using 1 or 2. Okay. I got some fresh water here. And the first thing I like to do is kind of put water where I want the paint to be, and then I let the pigment go on after. Okay, so I am going to try to paint some petals of some roses first. So it's hard to see, but say I was painting this rose, I would put water onto my painting in a kind of area where I want the paint to go, and I would then take my paint color, dab into it about 2 or 3 times, and then let it hit the paper. And you can sort of move your board around to let it go where the water is. Okay. When I do paintings like this, I sort of have the idea in my head. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm leaving white space around where I want. So that's creating those little white areas of light in there. Hope you can see that. The more water you add, the more it'll sort of spread around. The color I'm using, this sort of goldeny color, is called Indian yellow. And we just want to kind of create some leaf shapes, and they're kind of random. I mean, I did use a photograph to get the general idea, but as you can see in this particular one, I'm not using a photograph. I'm also working fairly quickly because the paper is very absorbent and it dries quickly. So now that you've got your basic shape of your petals, okay, we can always fill in sort of the details later, but I have water basically where the petals are going to be, and so I'm going to work on the background next. So I like to use a combination of sort of turquoise blues and royal blues. You can test out what kind of colors you have by checking it out on a little extra paper, so you can see there are actually different vibrancies. And when you get one that you kind of like, or is a mixture, what I do is I put it very close to the petals, and then I add basically just water, and the water goes all the way to the edge. And I just keep directing the water to go to the edge of the paper. to lighten and dilute the pigment. And then you can kind of just touch your brush and it'll go in that direction now. And it doesn't really matter if the yellow gets in there or if you change colors, put more intensity. And I just like to make sure it's always flowing. And I like to have not dry on dry, I always like to have it quite wet. And what I do on one side, I like to do on the other. So if I use blues there, try to use the same blues on this side. And I'm trying to make a diagonal across the paper. And at any point I can put this down to dry. And when I do, that's when I work on a second one. So that's what I'm going to do. So this second one, I'm just going to show you how I make a Saskatoonberry branch. So here's me adding the water first in branch-like format. The branches are going to be kind of a gray blue. So you can use black to get a really light gray. You can dilute it in water. I have kind of a green-black color here. And as I put it on, the water carries it to where I had it already on the paper. I can decide to make the branches thinner as I go out, add more branches than originally. Okay. I also now am going to decide where I'm putting berries. So this is droplets of water that are circular. And they're kind of at the ends of branches, around branches, at the beginning of branches. And then I'm taking kind of a magenta color and a blue and mixing it together to get kind of a purpley color. And you can see that as I add it to the painting, it is a circular motion, kind of trying to put it where the water was. I'm going very quickly. They're not perfect circles, they're fairly close together in clumps. Okay, and while they're wet, I'm touching them with water to make the purple color sort of spread into the background. We're going to do several layers of berries, so it doesn't matter that they are not holding their shape, just that the color is spreading into the sky. You can also take green and put some leaves in here. I'm using kind of a sagey green. If you want it more blue, add some blue and green together. Okay, and I'm just sort of touching it all over the painting. I'm also adding water now, and letting the water flow through the painting, smearing the colors together. And finally, the other color I want to smear together is a blue as a sky color. So I'm just adding blue. I use blues that I like. You can use whatever blues you like. I want the blue to also flow this direction. Wherever I add water is where it flows. I tilt the board. I lay it flat to dry. It's not done, but it's on its way. Back to the rose. In this rose picture, Now I'm getting this sort of golden color. I'm trying to go around the edges of my petals. I'm trying to delineate them. Adding lots of water. Water is what makes the movement of the pigment. Sort of going around the edges of the petals. Coming closer, closing in some of the white spaces. You kind of want a few areas that show sort of more darker golden. It just sort of shows shadows. You can paint upside down. You don't always have to have your paper oriented the same way. Gives you a new perspective. Okay. Now I'm going to add some greens to my background. So I'm getting these greens that I like watered. I'm not putting green everywhere. It's supposed to represent a few leaves coming, but not everywhere. So I'm just kind of adding it to the blue, kind of suggesting a leaf that would be there. I'm just adding water to move the pigment around a bit. Okay, I think I want a little bit more deeper, darker blue. So I'm just adding more blue here to both sides while I'm working on the green. So this is just water to make it move. More pigment. You kind of don't want those drips to be in there, so that's why I'm spreading the water right to the edge. I mean, some people don't care that there's sort of a beginning to where the paint is and an end to where the paint is. I like it to be very subtle. I also like to add purple in here, because I think purple and green look kind of good together. They make each other pop, and it's all background anyways. So sometimes I add a little kind of purple. So you kind of have to sort of judge how much of one color you want in there for your atmosphere. I usually make it go diagonally. If you gotta look at this corner, that corner, that corner, and that corner, and try and make sure they're all different and different interests. I try not to have too much white, so even if I have a subtle amount of color going to a corner, I do it. So here I'm adding some purple. You could add some of your yellows if you want. Paint right over the tape. Don't be afraid to go over the tape. I've painted over the tape many times. It'll be coming off. And then you got to kind of put it down and look at it from a distance. I like to work on another painting while I'm doing that. Let's go back to this one. So this was purple berries. I'm now doing more purple in darker colors in the same spots where I had berries before. I am sort of painting like in a curve motion and kind of like painting the letter C. tinier as we go out. And you lose pigment on the brush. So my most darkest pigments are here, lighter pigments here. You can mix a lot of blues, reds, and purples for when you're doing Saskatoonberries, because berries are ripening at different times. So often on one clump there is a blue and a red and a purple berry. I'm going really fast here. You can go at the speed you like. Notice they're not very precise circles. Okay, and while they're wet, same thing, I'm adding water and pulling the color into the background. Hope you can see that. Getting drips all over the place because my water is way out there. Okay, now I'm going to add some blue again. Kind of letting it drip through the painting. Okay, so one thing I've noticed with this painting is the branches now are very light, so I'm going to go over the branches again. Kind of black. Going through the wet spots and the dry areas. Slowing down a bit. Don't want too many branches. Want some in the background, some in the foreground. You always want, I'm always painting away. I'm always painting in this direction. I've noticed I need some more green. Not very many leaves anywhere. I'm just kind of blobbing circular leaves everywhere. In amongst the foreground, in amongst the background. If they're on a wet spot, they spread. If they're on a dry spot, they look more like a distinct leaf. Okay, now I'm adding water to also make that color kind of flow into the background, flow down the painting. This is very absorbent paper. It's Strathmore 300, series 300. So it is kind of very absorbent. 140 pounds, 300 grams per meter squared. Okay, so that is my Saskatoonberry painting. I think it needs more purple. Can always add this later when it's a bit drier. Sometimes you need to hold it way out there to see it. And there's this one. So this is when you can add fine details when they're quite dry. Using these kind of, this color I think is a color called quinacridone gold. This is the very tips of things. And it is sort of outlining petals. But if I ever don't like the outline, you just add water to kind of dilute the outlining business. Okay, so that is how I'm ending this small tutorial. If you want to get more details or have more questions, go ahead and see you next time.